Well, first and foremost, what do you guys think of the bow tie? Wooden.
Yeah.
Nobody really sees the wooden look.
That's all my son wears.
I bought this years ago, and I thought, when will I ever wear this? But tonight's the night. A lot of you guys know me. I opened this clinic 10 years ago. I'm one of the U.S. Olympic team chiropractors, so I still do some consulting with that. I've been speaking for the last probably 15 years on just various topics. So detox is one of the more exciting ones to talk about because there is so much to it, and you guys will squirm a lot during this, so it's always fun for me to watch that. I had to break this into 2 parts and possibly 3, depending on how long this goes tonight. And then feel free to ask questions. Feel free to if I go long, walk out. I don't get offended because sometimes I get talking, and just feel free to leave. So part 1, we're going to cover food and kitchen tonight, and I'm going to break down just toxicity in general, kind of how to identify it, what it is. Part 2, we're going to get into personal care products. We're going to talk about cleaning stuff on that part 2. We're going to talk about protocols if I get to it, and that's why I put in there. Part 3, we're going to kind of do like maybe a Q&A and a more of a wrap-up if there's any questions, because there are a lot of things that people don't think are toxic. For example, that TV screen is toxic at some level. The Wi-Fi is toxic at some level, right? And these are all things that are kind of down the road. We'll discuss if we get to it sort of topics. I want to oversimplify everything. So very simple goal tonight. We want to stop adding as we subtract toxins. Is that fair? So I like using the pool as an example. I'm going to use a lot of analogies. Hopefully one of them sticks with you guys and you'll remember it and be able to share it with others. But the goal, when you think of your pool and there's 1 or 2 leaves that fall in it, it's not a big deal, right? We don't think about that. But if we let those leaves accumulate and we never get rid of what's already in there, we stop dumping leaves in the pool, it turns into a mess. So what I think it's underlooked at when it comes to toxicity or detoxing is people want the product, right? I think maybe some of you are here tonight and it was like, hey, he's going to tell me, take this supplement, it's going to cleanse my whole body, I'm going to be perfectly clean, and there's nothing else that I have to do, right? So what we're going to start with is minimizing the inflow, right? We're going to look at the products that we use, minimize that, then we're going to maximize the filtration system. And the bottom line is we're never going to get rid of toxins overall, but we want to minimize our exposure at all points that we can. So I want to start with this study. It was very interesting, came out years ago. Has anybody seen this or saw the clip online or on the news? So they did a study on newborn fetal blood, right? And it's supposed to be the purest blood that's out there. They haven't been exposed to anything. And here's some of the interesting findings that they had. There was over 200 chemicals in that blood. 175 of those chemicals were linked to cancer already. 210 linked to heart disease, 196 linked to birth defects. Some of the chemicals that we were finding, they hadn't been on market for over 30 years. Now, how does that end up in a fetus's blood? The parents and their parents. I think a lot of times that we don't realize that I'll give you an example. If you guys have had kids, or I guess of course all of us were born at some point, we start with a certain level of toxicity, right? And we don't realize that it's different for everybody in the room, that some of us started with a lot of toxins in our body, and some of us maybe a little. So you could see how certain kids, when they get exposed to little things, right? It could be just the new carpet that you put in, or the markers at school, they may have a reaction, or they may be sensitive because they're already started at a full level of toxicity, right? And this is how even things like vaccines, when it comes to giving vaccines to kids, some kids react right away and some kids don't. And that's where this kind of people trying to just blame vaccines for disease, it's not how that works, but do they contribute? Yes, based on some of the toxins that are in vaccines. And that's what we'll kind of touch on as we go. But the data has shown, and I'm guessing everybody in this room is older than me, you guys have probably seen this more than me, which is, when you guys were growing up, did you hear of kids with cancer? Were there kids in your school that you were like, yeah, you know, Joey got cancer? Obesity, childhood obesity wasn't really a thing back then. Leukemia is up 62%, brain cancer is up 40%. Autoimmune disease basically didn't exist when you guys were kids, right? And now there's over, and this is estimates, 50 million Americans that have autoimmune disease, which these are blood-based issues. And if we're starting life with chemicals in blood, do you think that's going to have an effect on our white blood cells and immune system? And it starts to screw up our body's ability to identify what's foreign and what isn't. And so we start attacking ourselves. And we're seeing that in women, this is what's somewhat interesting, is women are 75% of those autoimmune. So there's something to that I think of links back to toxicity, because in this room, do you think women use more products than men? Yeah. Yes. And some people may argue that I use a lot of products, but it's not true. And when you look at this and you think that's the case, we want to look at those trends and look at what are the products, because if there was something that was carcinogenic that you were using on a daily basis and you knew that, wouldn't you want to eliminate that? Or if it was hormone disrupting, or if it was creating allergies, I just spit, you're in the spit zone. You would want to eliminate some of that stuff, right? Yeah, if you guys want to, you're in the spit zone. You would want to eliminate that, and it's all over the place, and these are known things. These are things that have been studied, and the research shows it can cause cancer. It can cause allergies. Yet, we don't know because we use these products on a daily basis. Sunscreen and deodorants and cleaning supplies. And when I had you guys write down what foods you ate, by the end of this, I want you guys to see if the food you ate today was perfectly clean, or was there things in there that maybe we can steer away from and move closer to cleaner products and real foods. So where do most of the chemicals come from? The biggest one, and the thing that I would say is under talked about, is the amount of prescription drugs we use here in the United States. When you look at that number and you say 4 billion prescription drugs are ingested in the US each year, do we have 4 billion people in the US? So it's insane when you break down the numbers of how many medications are ingested over the course of 1 year in our country, and a lot of that is we have access to stuff, right? 70,000 chemicals used commercially. A lot of those aren't tested on humans, which you'll find in a little bit. 3,000 plus chemicals added to our food supply, 10,000 chemicals in food processing, preservatives. And I always use the example of, guys, if I had a bowl of preservatives right here, or a jug of yellow number 5, would anybody drink out of that? Would anybody want a sip of like blue number 4 that you find in foods? So if you wouldn't sip that, when you see it on a label, you guys get that that's going into your body. So you wouldn't have it by itself, but for some reason, we spray stuff on the food and we inject it into the food, or we process it with it so it looks a different color, and we're still ingesting this. And it's just interesting how the trend of the country finally hit a threshold where we're not living longer. It's the first time in human history where we're dipping down in age, meaning it always was, we're living longer, we're living longer, we're living longer. Now it's the first time that we're projected to decrease in life expectancy, which is scary because something has to change. We have to look at what that is. Now, how do we lose this, or how does this happen? I think we put responsibility on people that it shouldn't be, and we trust sources that just because culture's heading that way, or we see it on TV, and we trust things that are just safe. Now, when you look at these numbers here, the chemical manufacturers aren't required to test the majority of new chemicals on the effects to humans. A lot of the stuff that's out there in makeups and hair care and additives and preservatives never get tested. They get tested by us ingesting them, enough people having issues, and then realizing, wait, we screwed up, and now they start creating these side effects or things that get put in the literature. It's wild that it can take as little as 3 weeks to get new chemicals approved, and drugs take typically years. You can see nowadays they're trying to speed things up with certain things. And do those drugs that take years to study always work? Do we always look back and be like, wow, that Vioxx was amazing for its whole course of the time that they created Vioxx? Or, in that instance, it killed 65,000 people, and then they said, we should probably pull that off the market. Even though, during the time, the science of that drug went through all the testing, all the approvals, all the FDA that we trust, and made it through all that, but it still took time to realize there were still things we missed. And I always go back to, guys, science is never catching up to nature or God. We do the best we can with it, but I think, and what I try to teach patients, is we need to get back to principles. Would everybody agree you want to minimize your exposure to chemicals, if not eliminate them completely? So I don't think there's anybody that says, I can't wait to be on a medication forever, right? Or a medication period, right? If I could avoid medication for the rest of my life, that's a win. Does that mean it doesn't have a place? Not necessarily. Guys, if I get hit by a car out there and I'm in a lot of pain and bleeding, what do you think I want? Pills, potions, lotions, I don't care what it is, save my life. But the plan isn't stay on that forever, right? It's to help me out in the short run, which that's what chemicals have had some use for, but then quickly get off of it because the body doesn't recognize this stuff. And it bothers me that in our country, other countries are banning this stuff, right? There are thousands of chemicals that they have banned because of toxicity and because of what it's creating over longer term studies that we still use every single day. And none of your doctors are holding classes, I imagine, and telling you about your makeup and shampoo and soap and cologne and perfume. When you go in and say, hey doc, I have asthma, or I have sinus issues, or I have allergies, and why am I reacting to the environment and these certain things, but my friends aren't that are breathing in the same stuff? Well, there's a reason, and we want to get into that stuff. What is a toxin? Super simple, and this was interesting to me because I'm kind of into the dorky stuff of this, which is toxins have no hormetic window. And what that means is there's zero benefit to the toxin itself. So what are things that have zero benefit? Do you guys know any chemicals that are like, hey, if I get exposed to even a little bit of that, it has zero benefit to my body? They used to put them in teeth. I think sometimes they still do. It's silver. Mercury is one of those that any little exposure to mercury is 100% negative to the body. No benefits to that. No window of being good. Now, certain things have a window. And they're different. And then so I tried to illustrate that in this, that, for example, this is a wide zone of this being okay for your body. This is a small zone where it just doesn't do much, and then this is too much, where it's reached its maximum and is now harmful to your body, right? And I'll give you a good example of something that's very good for you in a very large window, but can become toxic, which is water. Do you guys get that water can become toxic to you if you drink too much of this? Is that fair? How about exercise? Can you over-exercise and it becomes harmful to you? Yes. So do you see where I'm going with this? There are things, though, that have wide windows, and then there are things that have very narrow and small windows. And a lot of medications, I was trying to draw it on here, are like this, where the benefit's very small. And here, there's problems. We want things that have a wide window where you can't really screw them up, right? Like water, like exercise. But you got to be aware of this stuff and understand we want to know about toxins. Now, the toxins that have no benefit at all, we should be avoiding. And this is where things that, one takeaway today is read labels of anything you put in your body, around your body, meaning you breathe them in, right? Or injected inside of your body, or on your body. If you don't know what that stuff is, then you have to understand that you're rolling the dice at some level. And if you're doing that every single day, when we think of the products that we use every single day, and we just arbitrarily go, hey, I'm gonna put on sunscreen because I'm gonna go out in the sun, and educationally we think, well, I don't want the sun to burn me, and that's what somebody taught me, right? So this chemical on my skin that's gonna sink in my pores and be found in every single cell within 26 seconds, I'm gonna put this on to protect me from the sun that God designed. Sounds a little weird when you say it that way, right? Now, if I knew what this was, and I know all the chemicals, and I know that I would eat this, then it wouldn't be a problem, right? And that's what we want to look for, is products that are edible, that our body recognizes, that we know about. Anything that's on here that I don't know, I need to understand what can it cause. You know what's interesting about a lot of these that are in here? In most of the sunscreens that people use? Cancer-causing chemicals that when heated up are driven deeper into your skin and can speed up the rate of skin cancer. Because we're only meant to be out in the sun for a small amount of time. And you know the mechanism that tells us that? Sunburn, right? But the sun is healthy for us in, again, windows. You guys with darker skin, guess what? You can be out in the sun a heck of a lot longer, right? That's how the body was meant. Whereas somebody from Alaska, pure white skin, they have a small window of beneficial sun. But you can see how why there's differences and trends in some of this stuff. But I want you guys to recognize that, and then we want to eliminate the no benefit stuff. Okay? So what are some of the no benefit stuff that we're going to look at? Well, if you answer yes to any of these questions, you use plastic containers, you eat non-organic meat or dairy, use a microwave, Teflon covered cookware, eat processed. Is there anybody in this room that's perfect in this? No. So awareness, right? We want to look at this. And it's not to be perfect. I don't want you guys leaving here and be like, I can't even live in my house and I need to burn everything down and live in the jungle. We need to just look at this and go, all right, I can change a few of these, right? And then we change a few more, and we change a few more, and we change a few more, and then we work on those systems of elimination. So I use this analogy a lot, which is somewhat like the pool. But if you look at every single cell and we just consider all of our cells, the 75 trillion cells that we have as buckets, those buckets can get filled up, right? And it starts with what was passed on, what we talked about at the beginning, the fetal blood. Then if you get vaccinated when you were little and then you started taking antibiotics or any sort of medications, and you think of the amount of medications that we've taken since being a child. And then from there, we have food chemicals that we've been eating and household cleaners that we breathe in, and then personal care products, and then genetically modified stuff. At some point, if we're not detoxing, right, making sure that we're eliminating as much of that as we can, so stop dumping in the bucket, and if we don't have something that empties the bucket every now and then it turns into disease. Now, depending on where that cell or group of cells is located, then that's the name of the disease, right? If it's a group of cells in my sinuses that are bombarded, that's filling up, those buckets are filling up, what's the disease name for that? Or what are things that people have issues with?
Sinus infection.
Yes, sinus infections, right? And so you go into the doctor and we just tell the doc, like, my sinuses are inflamed. They name it for you guys. They give you what to fix it?
Antibiotic.
A chemical that puts you further back, right? And again, at the end of the day, that's when everything started becoming very real, when I started looking at, wait, why would the body give me one minor symptom and me not consider that my body is so intelligent that it's doing the right thing? So if my sinuses are inflamed, the goal should be decrease inflammation, right? Find out what's inflaming it, get rid of the stuff that's inflaming it, and then eat foods and supplements that support the sinuses. Instead of, let's just dump another chemical in and force this to do something while it's creating sickness and disease somewhere else, right? So again, toxic cells are always going to equal disease, and they will always show up in the form of groups of cells that then turn into named things, whether it's sinuses or lung issues or whatever it may be. Now, I'm a big proponent of we cannot get well unless we do focus on the cell. And when you focus on the cell and you understand how the cell works, and you can give it what it needs and eliminate what it doesn't, it's amazing. Now, I put a cell sample up there. I want to show you here as well, because what we learned in biology class when we were kids is no longer true, which is that the nucleus of the cell controls everything, and that your DNA, your genetics there's nothing you can do about your genetics, and your bad genes are going to rule your life, and you're supposed to get disease at certain points in your life. Do you guys really think that we were built for disease, or were we built for health? So if disease shows up, then something's off. Now, how do genetics work, and how does the cell work? So you do have a nucleus, and it does house your DNA. Look at your DNA as on buttons and off switches, right? Same little trigger here, and you just have, again, millions of these on and off. Now, depending on what the gene itself is, it could be a cancer gene. So, right, we all have bad genes. We all have mutated genes. We all have issues. So it's not that we're going to all have perfect genetics, but the way genetics work is they get stronger over time in every single species, right? There's no species on the planet that's gone extinct because of this. Do we ever go, hey, I don't know, what's a recent species that's on the way out? Sea turtles, I think. If not, we're going with that as an analogy. If sea turtles are starting to die, do we go, man, they must have bad genetics? Or what's the logical thing that you guys see that we look at when sea turtles are dying? Or any animal species? What do we look at? Environment. What are they eating? What are they swimming in, right? What are we doing that's polluting them that then is creating mutations or creating sickness and disease or killing them faster, meaning it's turning on their cancer genes. Now, what determines turning on or off? It's not just pre-programmed, and that's what we have to get out of our minds when you hear about all the fear of everything that's going on in our healthcare system right now. You know what talks to this or tells this what to do? The cell membrane and the environment of the cell. Kind of like when I walk outside, if it's really hot outside, my skin detects the heat and it tells my body to do what? Sweat, cool down. My body wasn't programmed to take, 14 steps out the door and it says, hey, start sweating automatically. It goes outside, it finds out what the environment dictates, and it adapts. Well, what are the adaptation things here, or what controls, or what's in the cell membrane, are all these little receptors, right? Different receptors, hormones, enzymes, nutrients, and they're portals into the cell, right? And then what happens is a hormone or something docks here, it determines the environment, it sends a signal to what? Your blueprints, your DNA, and when this is told what to do, now all of a sudden that cell does that job based on environment, not program, not your genetics, not grandma, not grandpa. You know what it's based on? Your habits, your toxicity, your diet, your exercise regimen, things that you can control. Nobody likes hearing that because whose responsibility becomes their health? Yeah, guys, you can't go back to like, oh, yeah, my diet, it runs in my, and it happens all the time. Like it runs in my family history. You guys have probably heard the quote, it runs in your family history because nobody runs in your family. It goes back to, guys, there's common things that we do that are same as our parents and same as our brothers and sisters and grandparents because they're habits. Like if my parents worked out all the time, I'd probably work out all the time growing up, right? If my parents didn't, I probably wouldn't. What food do you think I would eat when I would come home from school? Did I just make my own food and say, hey, mom, dad, I'm going to eat healthy stuff? Rarely does that happen. I ate what my parents ate, right? But at some point, you got to break that, right? If you see that trend in your family, let's get off the genetic thing. It's been disproven. Nobody wants to talk about it because it's easier for you guys to buy into this and then sell you stuff to force it or sell you stuff that makes you adapt. So going back to this, we're going to create natural toxicity from just waste. So that's why I put a factory plant in there. There's going to be garbage. Like you just make garbage in your house. You got to take the garbage out. So there has to be systems to eliminate, and we want to make sure that that's happening. If not, I look at this as we need to make sure the receptors are good, and we need to make sure the cell membrane's protected. The cell membrane's mostly fat, so we need healthy fats. If we have bad fats or we have issues, these portals of exiting, eliminating, become like this. And this is what inflammation and cellular congestion starts to look like, right? Where now all of a sudden the hormones that are trying to signal, whether it's estrogen, progesterone, the weight leptin, any hormone that's trying to do its job, trying to tell this something, it all of a sudden is getting skewed because of the amount of inflammation in the environment, the bad fats that we eat, the trans fats that we eat. And then not only that, the products and the waste that you're building up in your house here, it can't not get out of the cell, and the cell has to adapt. And when it adapts, this is where when I teach like cancer classes and diabetes classes and different things, I show you guys at a cellular level just very simply why the cell would respond the way it responds. It always does what it's supposed to do based on its environment and interpretation. So a cancer patient cell and a diabetic cell. I'm going to show you very simply the difference between the two. That's the difference. What these receptors are sugar receptors. So a diabetic, They're sugar receptors to take sugar from the bloodstream that's floating by here. So from the artery, we eat sugar. We have all this sugar. A diabetic can't find a parking space, or there's very few parking spaces, to take it from the blood sugar and get it into the cell. Therefore, their blood sugar stays elevated, right? A cancer patient's the exact opposite. When you eat sugar, the first thing it goes to is all these receptors that the cell has adapted to soak in all that sugar and pulls it right in and feeds the cancer cells. Both of these cells didn't just exist out of nowhere. They adapted based on our environment over a period of time. Does that make sense? So now, these are very obvious examples in the sugar world, but you can see the complexity of all these diseases that are out there with autoimmune and the different things that occur at the receptor level, that then after there's enough of these, we just label them. So to change both of these, it still comes back to, in this example, eliminate sugar, right? We don't want to feed cancer, and it has nowhere to go, so we don't want it in our blood. Eliminate sugar, and then repair the receptors back to what a normal cell would look like, something like that. Repairing the receptors in the form of eating healthy fats, detoxing your body, decreasing inflammation. That was a lot to throw at you guys, and I went a little sciencey. Any questions on any of that? Long story short, responsibility falls back to you and focusing on getting the cells eliminating, and let's maximize the nutrients that are going in based on these cell membranes. Okay, I think I clicked too many here. So we're going to start with foods. Step 1, minimize toxins, food and kitchen cleanup. So I'm going to go through frankenfoods, herbicides, GMO, preservatives. A lot of this is very obvious, but I want to point out what to look for, especially in grocery stores. We're going to talk about cookware, because you could have great food and ruin it with that, right? And then tap water, which should be very obvious, but since most of our body is water, and the fluid, of course, around the cells and in the cells is mostly water, we need to have good sourced water and make sure we're at least looking at that. And really, it's just some level of filtration that we have to have. So what are frankenfoods? It's anything that man has screwed up, right? So it could be an apple that was a God food that man has screwed up. How do we screw up an apple? Spray it with something. How else? Genetically modify it, right? When we think we know more than the designer of the apple, and whatever you guys believe in, I believe that God knew what the heck he was doing, that we want to go back to the simple. We don't want to add preservatives. We don't want to color it a different color. We don't want to spray it so it tastes or so it grows better and eliminates bugs. We want it how it was designed to be, right? And that's changed over the years because our soil has been screwed up for years. Okay? The average person ingests 140 to 150 pounds of additives a year. Does that mean you guys are just, ordering pounds of additives and just eating additives? Or is that just the small accumulative leaves that are falling in your pool that just continue to build up and add up to a heck of a lot? 80% of antibiotic use is in livestock. So when we think we're doing really well, we got to look at the meats and how clean the meats and the sourcing of the meats are, because what the animals are eating or injected into them, guess what then we do? We get the same stuff. We got to look at that. So find the food in this picture. What do you guys see that's food? Yep. Yeah, I think it's lettuce or good. There's only 2 food items. Now, some of you may think, well, that's food, and that the ice cream's food, and the Doritos are food, and I just threw in a rubber band ball, because it's clearly not. But it has the same nutrient value as the others. At the end of the day, guys, those are edible substances. They're like food, but they're not food. And when we can really look at that and define the fact that that stuff your body recognizes, raspberries and bok choy or lettuce or whatever that is, your body knows that. And what are the ingredients of those 2? What are the ingredients? If I were to pull up the ingredient list of this right here, what is it? Yeah. And this right here, 1 ingredient. We know it, right? Simple. We try to get too complex in our thinking and think, I don't know what to eat. You know what to eat. If this was your plate and I said eat food, you knew what the food was. For some reason, though, we choose these other things because of taste buds. We're not looking at food as fuel. So another takeaway here. What you have to look at is not this section of the if you're going to buy something packaged, right? So first and foremost, this stuff where you don't need an ingredient label, but say there is an ingredient label, what should you look at? Who cares about all of this? Top up. You know where you should look? Can you guys read that? I don't know if you can read that. Yeah. Ingredients. Why? Because if you don't know what some of this stuff is, just like I said earlier, and it's going in your body, then that's a problem. Now, one of the things that you'll see is blue number 2 or 1 or whatever that says. Is that good for you? So I don't care what this product is. I don't care, oh my gosh, it doesn't have much fat, or we get hung up on the things that somebody told us, some Weight Watchers program, and the points and the different things. Keep things simple. I want to know what this stuff is. If I can't read it, don't eat it. If I know it's a toxin, don't eat it, right? And the longer this list is, the worse it is for you. Very rarely you're going to pull up grab something that's healthy and see 45 ingredients, right? You're going to see maybe a handful, and every single one of them you should recognize, right? Now, take a look at this. This is the classic milkshake, and it's Burger King's, but any of them look like this. Which, if you guys were making a strawberry milkshake, what would you add to this to make that?
Milk.
Milk's a good start.
Sugar.
Sugar if you need sugar. Strawberries is a great start. Do you guys see strawberries or milk in any of that list? This is what you're getting when you get a milkshake at Burger King or any, for that matter, fast food. There's a reason it is that price point, because this combination of chemicals tastes like it, but it's not strawberries or milk. And you can see how they're called the same thing, but you're telling me that's food? So we do this, again, occasionally. It's just a treat. We're just taking bottles of chemicals and hoping that these things are going to figure it out. And for the most part, we don't figure it out. We store it. So no strawberries, no milk. That would be a good starting point. Other things to keep an eye on: herbicides, pesticides, steroids, hormones, antibiotics. These are things, again, mostly like the steroids and hormones and antibiotics. You're looking at animal products. So what do we want? If we're going to the store and we're saying, all right, I went to this toxicity class, I want to make sure I'm eating clean, you want meat that is antibiotic free, no steroids, no hormones, right? You also want that meat to have eaten what God intended it to eat, not what man force-fed it to eat, right? What are cows meant to eat? Grass. What do most? So if you buy any beef that doesn't say grass-fed and grass-finished, then guess what you're getting? Grain-fed, antibiotic. Typically, the grain that they're feeding them, it was sprayed and genetically modified, so that gets toxically bioaccumulated into that cow meat that now you're getting for 99 cents, right? They have what's called they call it the Bionic burger at McDonald's. A guy forgot, bought 2 cheeseburgers, put one in his coat, forgot a year later, opened up his closet, reached into his coat, there was still a cheeseburger in his pocket. He had the receipt was with it, and it was from a year before, and guess what the meat looked like? The same as it would. All he needed to do was warm it up. Nothing ate it, no mold, nothing was breaking that down. So then he created an experiment where he has like a museum of McDonald's burgers where he just kept buying them and just putting them out. And you see that it's not getting broken down, so we tend to think we're just eating stuff and there's no issues. Dairy, you want to avoid dairy as much as possible. Cow's milk is meant for what? Cows. Guys, and again, at the end of the day, like it was like oh gosh, it's so simple. It's to fatten up baby cows. Just like mother's milk is to get our human babies bigger. There's stuff in there for the cow to do that. Now, when you look at this little fun fact, 1 glass of inorganic store-bought milk contains residue of about 100 different antibiotics. So you guys are like, yeah, I haven't had antibiotics in years. But you had a glass of milk every single morning for years. And so you're getting a low-dose antibiotic that's killing good bacteria in your body, and you're developing gut issues, not to mention the other stuff that comes along with this. So what do we recommend? When it comes to milk, if you're like, man, I just love milk and I want to have milk, what would be a better choice?
Almond milk.
Nut milks, right? Milk. Almond milks. But again, even those, what do you have to look at? Especially store-bought.
Organic.
You got to look at organic, but you got to look at, too, the ingredient list. Because sometimes they're like, Listen, marketing people understand the fads and the trends and the things that are out there. So it might be coconut milk, but then you look at it and it's like, oh, there's a little bit of coconut in there and then 14 other things that also, but they put coconut milk. So it's like, oh yeah, my doctor said switch over to coconut milk. So be careful. The takeaway ingredients, look at the list. What's a GMO? I think you guys are familiar with this. It's a genetically modified organism. 50 countries, including France, Germany, and Italy, have restricted GMOs, while the US doesn't even require labeling. So it's hard to identify. Are you eating something that has been modified? Well, I'll give you one little thing that I found that you can look for, because they're not going to tell you this. Oh, that's on the next slide. Well, here's something interesting. Where's the exposure coming from? They're doing stuff like this. Where do you think at any point fish DNA and fruit DNA should ever be mixed? But scientists are thinking, well, wait, we can grow this fruit in a colder environment if we take DNA from an animal and splice it in with bananas or tomatoes and grow it in a colder environment. Do you think there's going to be consequences to that at some point? Yes, guys. They're doing it not for health. And that's one of the big things to understand is when something's genetically modified, it's not to modify it for health, it's to modify it to grow more of it, right? Feed more people. And people are looking at like, well, yes, like this is helping like grow rice in Africa and all these. Guys, if it was said like this, I'm gonna get more stuff to poison people in Africa, would that be something we'd be into? No. We don't want to give people things that harm them over the long run just because they think it's food, right? We want to look at what this stuff really is. And they're literally doing this stuff. They're trying to, again, create beef from just in Petri dishes. Like, this is where we have to at some point realize, like, this is just nuts. As smart as we think we are, let's keep things extremely basic and go back to just how this stuff was meant to be. So here's something to note. Now, typically organic's going to be listed, but it always starts with a 9 on that little SKU code, and it's a 5-digit typically for organic. If it's conventionally grown, meaning it was sprayed, it was, or pesticides, then it'll have that 4-digit code starting with a 3 or 4, but the one to look for is this one. So if it's a 5-digit starting with an 8, it was genetically modified, and that's the ones I would run from, right? So if you have to, because of budget, not get everything organic, and you need to choose something, don't choose that on the left, but your best is middle. Of course, it's organic. The fact that we have to ask that it's organic is crazy to me, right? We've normalized that spraying it doesn't have a label, but organic has to be, we have to make that a special category, right? That's what's weird, guys. It's weird what's being normalized with a lot of things nowadays. This is very abnormal stuff. And there's an example in the store of an organic apple. But for the most part, stores are putting organic because they want you to buy that stuff. 3 million tons of pesticides are used every single year worldwide. So if you're looking for a budget tip, look for the Clean 15. So on ewg.org, this is where you can look up the current. So this is probably old, but the current Clean 15, meaning those fruits and vegetables on the left are the least sprayed. So even if you bought them conventionally, those would be the ones that you can kind of get away with. They're the least sprayed. On the right, the dirty dozen are the most sprayed or most chemically grown. And so those on the right, you want to buy organic. Does that make sense? So it's kind of one of those things, and you can find the active list, but they generally stay the same just on how these plants are typically grown. Strawberries are always high on the sprayed list. I mentioned this already, toxic meat. So hormones, antibiotics, sprayed, grain-fed, farm versus pasture or wild. So you want pasture, you want wild caught fish, not farm-raised. You want to make sure you're looking at this stuff. And if there's one category in the food world to focus and spend money on, it's meats. Okay? So if you're like meats or vegetables, meats all day, every day. Okay? Shellfish good for you? There's this collective, or there's this book that's a collection of books that kind of talks about some food that you should avoid, that there's a lot of wisdom in that book called the Bible, and then science has now backed it up that you should avoid shellfish and pork, and there's a very specific reasons. Shellfish like shrimp and lobster and crab and all the things that you guys love, which luckily I grew up and I didn't like seafood at all. But it's like, I always explain it like it's like taking your water filter off after it's filtered water for a couple months and eating that. That's what they are of the sea. They're the bottom feeders and they clean up the water. So when shrimp are just swimming around, they're cleaning up water. So when you eat it, toxins taste good, and you'll know that in pork as well, like bacon and that fattier meats. Why is pork bad? Doesn't have a good detox system. All the stuff it ingests, pigs ingest and roll around it doesn't detox very well. So it sits in fat. Toxins are the safest in fat in our bodies and in any animal body. So you want to avoid those, right? Here I am in the South telling you guys to avoid that. There's other meats though, right? Just if minimize, and I'll tell you at the end, guys, it's not that you're like saying the rest of your life you're never going to have that. But it's the point is to get to where you're 80-20 in your life stuff. 80% of your life should be really healthy. Then you can dabble with the 20. Ideally 90-10, right? Ideally 95-5. But at some point we got to flip you from 80 bad, 20 good to moving this direction, and that's where I think a lot of times you just eliminate that. This is something interesting that I don't think people realize what we do. We do food sensitivity testing. It's $300. Insurance doesn't cover it, but it's simple and it gives you a whole print off of unique things that are toxic to you, in the sense that when you ingest them, and it could be good stuff like celery's on there in this one, that it gives you lists of fruits, vegetables, dairy, grains. I think it's 63 or 72 different foods. You prick your finger, we put it on these little cards, we send it off to a lab, they give you a whole analysis that's super easy to read, and it identifies what are things that you eat on a daily basis that are creating issues inside your body. And issues in the sense that you're not allergic where you're gonna go to the hospital, but inflamed and bloated and holding on to weight and toxic to you. So by identifying those, they're really nice, and it would be unique to you. Because sometimes we'll look at, like, we might look at your guys' foods that you wrote down and be like, wow, you're eating really well. But if you're still having issues, or you're still tired, or you still have weird stuff, let's dive a little bit deeper, because celery for you and lettuce for you might be not good for you based on your body attacking it. Does that make sense? You're having an immune response to it, is what this is going to tell you.
When you say you offer the test?
We do it, yep. So we send it off, because we don't have a lab or anything, but yes, we get them for you. It's a kit. And then I just have to sign the paperwork, so then the reports come back to me, and then we get it for you. Really cool stuff. And to me, it's like one of those things, why aren't at physicals, your yearly physicals, why aren't doctors looking at this? Like, we eat food all the time. Be nice to know every single year, like, hey, what should I avoid? Go ahead.
I just want to know, is that the same, the food system, is that the same as eating to your blood type?
Somewhat. So this is going to be more specific, because it's not just generic and like you're type A or you're type O, and generally this is good for you. It's you uniquely, because you uniquely can develop things that within your normal blood type you could get away with. But sometimes people overeat that. Like, I had a patient that just always ate a ton of almonds. And it was just one of those things that then almonds showed up on the list of like, yep, you just too much, hormetic window type of deal, where the body started realizing like this is becoming a toxin. And a lot of that, what's nice is like you don't have to eliminate it forever. For the most part, it's like sometimes it's eliminated for a month, sometimes it's eliminated 3 months, sometimes it's eliminated 6 months. Some of them are like, probably shouldn't eat that ever again. Here's another more advanced thing to think about. I truly believe in like detox happens daily. There are cleanses and things that we're going to get into and probably in part 3. And at the end of this, I have a couple like little food things that I'm going to teach you guys. But I think every day, if we're conscious about what we're eating and we just start with real foods, that's step 1. Now we get more advanced. If anybody has gut-related issues, or you're like, I eat food and I'm tired, or I eat food and I'm cranky and it affects my mood, and the food I'm eating is really good, then you want to look at food combination, which what this is certain foods digest very well together and certain foods are polar opposites. For example, if I have a piece of steak and a banana and I decide to eat those two things right at the same time in the same meal, do you think that they digest the same when they hit my stomach? No, so what happens? One of them sits there and the other one gets worked on. As that one sits there, guess what happens? It off-gasses, we bloat, we feel crappy, and we're like, wait, both of those things are good for me, but I'm not maximizing my energy. So if you combine the things that digest well, you increase your energy and decrease your digestive time too. So the examples here, the neutral foods are on the right. So meaning anything over here on the right, you can eat with those 4 groups. But what you don't want to do is eat these groups together. You ready for something that I used to, and still not good at? A salad, okay? On paper, it's going to sound awesome. So you put salad, so you have lettuce in there. That's over there, neutral, great. I throw strawberries on the salad, right? Then I put chicken on the salad. And then I throw some nuts on the salad. And now all of a sudden I have 3, 4 different groups that when I eat that salad, and it's raw, which is harder to digest than cooked, now it's going to sit there and it's going to be more challenging for my body to digest. Now, if I had digestive issues, severe digestive issues, IBS, Crohn's, any of that stuff, do you see how just by eating healthier, you would be screwing some things up in a sense, right? Versus I love mono dieting as a cleanse. So this is a good takeaway as well. Even if you just took one thing and you were like, all right, I'm going to do fresh fruits. And you mono ate fresh fruits. So for breakfast, you didn't have a banana, toast, eggs. You just had bananas. And if you're still hungry, you eat another banana. And after that banana, if you're still hungry, what should you eat? Another banana in mono dieting for that meal. And here's why I love that. Because if I was in the wild and you threw me in the jungle or whatever, and I found food, am I going like, oh, I'm going to find this food and I'm going to go look for another food type? Or I'm going to eat a bunch of whatever I just found? Guess what animals do? That. We should do that. We just have access to too much. And all these nice restaurants and fancy little combinations and all this stuff. But digestively, this is a good one. And significantly increases your energy because if I just eat the bananas, my body's ready. Eat it, ready to do it. Eat it, ready to do it. Not banana, oh, now there's toast, starchy. It's going to take a little bit longer. Now I just had some sausage. That's going to take a little bit longer. And now all of a sudden, energy, and I feel crappy after eating.
So are you saying we shouldn't have a fresh fruit salad that's got different kinds?
So you could do combinations of fruit. So yeah, you could do any fruit together. What I was basically saying is if you want to just mono diet, you could find out how your body operates by just eating one individual fruit. But in this, you could eat any fruit together. Strawberries, blueberries, bananas, apples, and you could put salad. You know, vegetables in general are neutral. So you could do, again, a strawberry salad that just has these 2 categories, right? But what are the classic meals in the US? Sandwiches. So we have bread, a protein, and right away we're going to feel like crap. Those 2 don't digest very well. What's, steak, potatoes, right? These are all things that you see that why we feel crappy. Think of Thanksgiving and how we go into a coma after that combination of stuff, right? So at the end of the day, again, this is more advanced. I don't want you guys to get too hung up on this if you're not here yet. But it is interesting, and some of you guys are in the room like, okay, I can focus in on just trying to eat one of these things. So even pasta, like pasta's not good for you, but if you just ate pasta and not meatballs with it, so you ate pasta, bread, and that's the only category, at least your body is prepping to break down starches the whole time, not, again, meatballs and fruits and different things.
So you couldn't eat if you ate pasta or you ate like spaghetti, what's the fruit that they use to?
Tomato?
No, it's another fruit that you, the stringiness of like.
Oh, spaghetti? Like spaghetti squash or zucchini?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those things with the protein, could you do that?
Zucchini would fall over here and say like a meat. Absolutely, like that would work. You see how that would work together? Whereas, again, pasta and meat. And so there is a cookbook too that all the recipes in it's called Everyday Detox, which is where I got this concept. And there's a really cool book from like the 70s that talks about just food combination principles and timing of when you should eat. And it gets more complex. And again, when I think somebody's at that level where you need to have that conversation, I will. But for the most part, it's like, hey, are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough sleep? Right? Are you eating real foods? That's the starting point for most people. And then we keep going to, this. But it is still something interesting to help detox. Okay, I put this in here some basic steps on if you're looking at a reset sort of thing. And so I love water fasting, which is going to sound crazy, but you just have water for a day to 7 days or longer. And it's challenging, but it's challenging mentally. You'll find very quickly that your body's incredible and can go a long time with the excess stores that we all have around our body, right? And the body becomes extremely efficient, and it keeps the healthy cells in water fasting, and it gets rid of the bad stuff. So there's a ton of benefits in water fasting. Now, am I suggesting go do a crazy long one? Not necessarily. Maybe for you guys, you do a 24-hour water only, right? And how I kind of stair-step it is then if you can do that, awesome. If not, you could do a juice fast. So that means you're going to skip the fiber. You're going to get pure nutrients, focus more on the vegetables, not the fruit juice. So ideally, you have very minimal to no fruit juice on a juice fast. It's mostly vegetables with things like, lemons and different things that are going to give you some more juice. But you don't want like apple juice, orange juice, just pure sugar, right? You want to keep the sugar content low, but you can do that for an extended period of time. I did a 14-day juice fast 3 or 4 years ago, and I lost 27 pounds in 14 days. Didn't want to, so it wasn't like, hey, this is my goal. Like, it was more to test my mindset and kind of see how the body would adapt to that. And it's interesting, like there were only like 3 or 4, there were like 3 days that were kind of hard. The rest were like, I feel amazing. And it made me start thinking like, why do I even eat? Like I started, like the epiphany I had was like, we should look at eating like filling up your gas tank in your car. Like I don't get excited to go to the gas station and just put fuel in it, right? That's how we need to turn food not into something emotional, just something into like, hey, this just fuels me and keep going. Does that make sense? We've made too much emotion there.
I'm diabetic. I drink a lot of water.
Yep.
But
we would need to, so I wouldn't recommend, if you have blood sugar issues, we wouldn't go jump into that. But there are things that we can do, absolutely, that still strain that. And the tough part is when medications get involved too, that's the challenge, is there's this teeter-totter that we have to just monitor your blood sugar a little bit closer and pull away the medication. Because here's what always was wild to me, is for most diabetics, type 2 diabetics, they have you guys carry around like Snickers bars and orange juice, right? In case your blood sugar goes too low, which isn't the point of diabetes. Your blood sugar is too high. So if the medication's crashing it down, like why would we want to stimulate it with, we would in that situation, but that shouldn't be like the way it works. We're just like trying to chemically bring things down. We should be bringing it down and not need to have this emergency sugar on hand. If you were to do water or juicing, you don't just jump right back into meals. You don't really want to chew much. So I like bone broth or some sort of stew or soup with cooked vegetables. Easy on the stomach. And what's nice is your stomach shrinks in these first two. So when you go back to eating, it's not going to be the plates that are this size. You'll realize like, wow, I can get away with just a little bit of food. And that food starts tasting amazing because you didn't have anything prior to it. So that's the other reason I like fasting, is anything sounds good to eat after you fast for a little bit. Intermittent fasting is how you generally want to live, which means you shrink your eating window to about 8 to 10 hours. So what that looks like, I always think of like a clock. The first time I take a bite of food, the clock starts ticking and I have 8 to 10 hours to eat everything in that window, right? So if I have my first meal at 10 a.m. and I'm doing an 8-hour fast, my last meal has to be in my body by 6 p.m. So that means I'm fasting from 6 p.m. until 10 a.m. the next day, and that's where the benefit occurs. Now, here's why that's important. It's another like energy thing. It's another digestive repair hormone thing. Is I think of like we're clocking into work right here. We're working the digestive system, and we're only going to work it for 8 hours, and then that system gets to clock out and do its job. And our body gets to focus not on food and not on breaking things down. It just gets to focus on healing, and all this good stuff. So that's why I tell you guys not to eat late at night. It really is not necessarily that. It's more like it's probably because you started eating at 6 a.m. and now you're having a meal at 10 p.m. You never gave yourself a break, right? So I don't care how much you eat in this window either. That's what else I like is we're not talking quantity. Heck, I don't care if you have 17 meals during this. You won't because the body won't really let you. But I don't care how much you eat in there. It's a good starting point to just train yourself timing-wise. Intermittent fasting. Add supplements, the detox system. So this here, I mean, this is the cleanest thing, and I'll talk about this at the end and what it does, but it's 2 parts to help eliminate. It just gently allows all the organs that detox, gives them what it needs so that you can continuously detox throughout the day. It's not those like, hey, I'm doing a detox and I'm on the toilet all the time. Nobody, like, there are times and places for stuff like that. You want to be gently detoxing all day, every day, and making sure there's support. Step 5, I put real food formula, meaning in your eating window, simplify your foods to real, and then simplify your decisions. So if you are a breakfast person, which for the most part I don't eat breakfast, simplify your choice to like, I'm either going to have a smoothie or I'm going to have eggs. And then any combination of those. So you can have a variety of smoothies and a variety of versions of eggs, but when you wake up, you're not thinking like pancakes, French toast, cereal, sausage. You're thinking, I'm only having 2 options. And then when you go to the grocery store, simplifies what you buy because now you know this. Lunches, I love just salads. Can you guys, I mean, we can think of 14 different varieties of salads, right? So you still have variety, but your decision's already made. If it's lunch, I eat salad. Do that all the time. Dinners, I like meat and 2 vegetables. So plug and play. Chicken and asparagus and green beans. Steak and Brussels sprouts and broccoli. Whatever. Or the same vegetable. Doesn't matter. But people want meal plans and they want to know, like, what do you do? How do you do it? Simple, simple, simple. And that keeps you eating real food. And then step 6, as I mentioned, we want to get you to where it's like 80-20. Where then you get to enjoy, like, hey, I want pizza. And guess what? You had a great week, eat pizza, right? If you're trying to overcome disease and you're trying to do certain things, you don't go 80-20, but we want to get you to a point where you can enjoy life and you're not just like, oh, I hate, I can't have anything. Yep.
What about oatmeal for breakfast?
Oatmeal for breakfast?
Well, where you say smoothie or eggs, could you add?
You could simplify those to whatever you like, yes. So like, I just put those in there as like to keep it super easy. But yeah, if you're like, hey, my choices are oatmeal or eggs. And then the key though with oatmeal is you got to look at, again, is it genetically modified? Is it organic? Yeah, because if it's sprayed or genetically modified, you don't want that. So how often should you be detoxing? Daily, regular bowel movements? If you're not having regular bowel movements, guys, that's a big deal. And I want you, you got to think about it. It goes back to like, if you're not taking out the garbage after you out of your house, it becomes a problem, a big problem. So that's something that we can focus on. Now there are simple ways to cleanse. The vitamin C flush, if you're ever constipated, you take 500 milligrams of vitamin C every 30 minutes until diarrhea. And it can be a lot, right? So you go 500, 30 minutes later, 500, 30 minutes later, 500. Add it up because you want to know what your total is at the end of that. But that's your body. It's vitamin C is water soluble. You can't overdose on it. Your body's way of saying too much is diarrhea. So it flushes you out. But then you want to know what that number is because it means you're really deficient in antioxidants. Very deficient. Vitamin C, there's only benefits, right? So what I love, immune support, digestive support, all the things that are great for you, plus it does the trick with that. And then, there's magnesium, there's different things, but finding the source is key. Go ahead. Yep. I wouldn't dose magnesium like that. I dose vitamin C like that. Magnesium is another thing to like add in at night just to kind of help as well. It's very good for digestive system, muscle relaxation, things of that nature. Heart. Yeah, and I'll tell you what's interesting, guys. So when I started getting into like nutrient testing, the amount of deficiencies that the average person walks around with on a daily basis is absurd and unknowing, me included. So I was surprised when I ran my panel and realized, wow, I need to take 7 different supplements. And that's eating pretty good. Now, why do you guys think that is? Like imagine, so I eat pretty good. Not perfect, pretty good, right? Why do you think it is? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, guys, the source. It was super interesting. I was reading this book on a guy who's he's in his 90s, incredible. Like, he used to be a vet, became a naturopath. He wrote a book called Dead Doctors Don't Lie. His point was the average doctor dies at age 51, which is, he's saying, like, I'm not taking the advice of somebody who dies at 51 if I want to live to 100, right? It was really cool in the way he talked about it. But what he discovered is there's something like 90 plus different nutrients that we need on a daily basis to function well, and essentially eliminated birth defects with kids or with pregnant women by just making sure they take all those things so there's no deficiencies. Created supplements, the whole nine. But one of the things that was interesting was, like, he said, if I had a tomato plant growing, literally the same plant, and I pluck this tomato from it and this tomato from it, do you think they're the same nutrients? They're different. Meaning, when we even look at, like, and we Google and say, like, say you guys are punching in all your macros, and it's like, oh, I ate a tomato, and it says, oh, it has 14 grams of lycopene and vitamin A and blah, blah, blah. That's an average tomato. Meaning, when we accumulate all the tomatoes, and if you eat one about that size, you get that. What if your tomato was 10 and it's supposed to be 14? The point was, if you're not supplementing, it's impossible to get the nutrients you need. And I'm not a big supplement guy, but that was very eye-opening to realize, like, wow, I can guarantee my nutrients by supplements, or I can hope that I'm eating perfectly and that everything that's going in my body is matching the requirements. So testing, but it goes back to show you, like, it bothers me that our doctors that we go to for our annual physicals, do they ever test any of that? Guys, they test blood work for pathologies and your height and your weight. If you ever really think about it, do you ever get health checks outside of our clinic as far as a nervous system check and us teaching and some of this stuff? Those are health checks. When it comes to, like, your annual physical, I realized, like, there's no point to it. They're waiting for disease, something bad to show up on your blood work, and then trying to treat it with things I don't want. Wouldn't you jump on the front of it and be like, hey, I want to know my food sensitivity so I eat the right stuff. I want to know if I have any nutrient deficiencies so I can eat the right stuff, right? I want to walk. I want to drink water. I want to sleep. I want to do all the things that I can control so that I never have to see those guys. Does that make sense? They don't, I mean, I've been in the game long enough and have taken care of enough medical people and have met enough medical doctors, surgeons, you name it, smart people that have no clue what health is or how to achieve it. And that's why I love that book, just because it was like, they're really good at what they do, which is like a cardiologist saved my life if I have a heart attack. How do I prevent my heart attack? They have no freaking clue. I went in because I've been working out and doing heart rate monitoring at the gym I go to. And I was like, man, my heart rate stays elevated. I want to just get some numbers. I want to just get some things and ask a cardiologist, like, is this normal? Is this abnormal? And the guy looked at me like I was nuts being in his clinic. He's like, so wait, nobody referred you here? No. Your blood pressure's normal? Yes. You're on no medications? No medications. You have any heart issues? Well, I'm concerned about my heart rate elevates and I don't know how fast it should decrease because I'm working out this hard. And is it normal to work out this hard and have your heart rate above maximum heart rate for this long of a period? And the guy's like, I don't know. He's like, well, your heart's, this was his legitimate answer. Well, your heart's a muscle. I'm sure, like, it's just going to train and get better. That was it. I was like, I just felt like you should have known more. Like, your specialty is heart. I'm spitting. I just feel like you should, this is a lot of spit. I just feel like he should have known more. It'd be like you guys asked me, like, hey, are there bones in your back? And, like, what do you do with those? And is the nervous system? It's like, yeah. And I could go through all of that and how you take care of it. But it was like, all right. So it was like, to prevent heart disease, I know more than the cardiologist. That's what was my takeaway from that. Okay, cool. I'll find somebody that functionally looks at this stuff. Some of the solutions here, read labels, organic, talked about that. Ideally, 100% grass-fed, finished meals, wild-caught fish, no antibiotics, no hormones, no GMO. And guys, if you can set up a garden, heck, source to mouth, the faster that is, the better. Like, by the time you guys eat an apple from the store, it was plucked probably 2-3 weeks before that. So think about the nutrients that are being lost from that. Versus you walk out in your garden, pluck something, put it on your table, eat it, maximum amount of nutrition and energy. So, big garden guy. All right, cookware number 2. I'll make this quick. Again, I know I'm a little over an hour here. Throw away your Teflon pots and pans. Yikes. People don't like that. Why? Here's the thing. At the end of the day, it's a chemical, right? There's been a class action lawsuit, I think, for years, and I haven't followed up with it, but it was with DuPont on how, like, even just the off-gassing from the plant was creating all these issues in the city that the plant was from. So there was a class action lawsuit to try to say, like, hey, it's creating all kinds of issues. So what they found was, yeah, when you heat up Teflon, it's bad for you, really bad for you. Not only leaches in your food, but the off-gassing, so women that cook more than men in general, this is where you'll see more hormonal disruptions and tumors and thyroid dysfunction. So childhood developmental problems, liver, pancreas, testicular, mammillary gland tumors, thyroid dysfunction. It goes back to the cell. The cell gets disrupted. The cell gets clogged. The cell's taking in these PFOAs. That's the main chemical that they found that's the problem. Well, it's not just your pans. It's in liners of different stuff. And then you'll see that I'm not a microwave fan, but microwave dinners, the lining of that. Anything that's non-stick, you wanna get rid of that stuff.
All non-stick pans?
Yes. What? What?
Do you have pots that you wear?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna get to that. So I'm not just gonna tee you up and tell you, but I told you, like, people get mad at this. At the end of the day, guys, so this was one of those, I held on my Teflon for a while when I first learned this years and years ago. I was like, God, I hate scrubbing it. But then when I got the stainless steel and it was like, all right, yes, it's 30 more seconds of, like, I just got to scrub it off. It's like sticky, right? And you lose a little bit of the egg on there or whatever it is. It's not that big of a deal for my health, right? So this chemical doesn't break down in the body. And this is like one of those that they would find 30, 40, 50 years after it no longer existed in people's bodies. Microwave, another one, stop using it. They banned this in Russia back in the 70s for a while because of the issues that they were seeing. And you guys have heard of, like, don't stare at the microwave, don't stand around the microwave, don't be around it when it's on. Have you guys heard of that? Or my parents told me that. Why do you think that is? Like, so wait, being around it's bad, but the food that you just put into it and are just zapping it is going to be good right afterwards? It's like radioactive, so it changes it molecularly. And so they did this little experiment with plants they microwaved water and then regular water, and they poured it on plants. So then you show the progression of day 1, day 5, day 9. Obviously the microwave one died, the regular one didn't. Nothing changed with the water, and it wasn't a temperature thing. They brought it back down to temperature, so it was the same temperature when they poured it on. The only thing that changed is one was nuked and one wasn't. So it changed how the water, and therefore the plant, which God created, didn't recognize the water that even though it was still water, right? Immune deficiencies, interference with brain function, memory loss, permanent brain damage, hormonal alteration. So say you are starting to lose the old ticker, right? You're starting to lose you're losing memory. Say you have hormonal issues and you're using a microwave frequently. Would this be something that's you guys could at least switch and go like, hey, just use the stove, right? Use the oven.
Air fryer.
Use the air fryer. And guess what? Does it taste better from the microwave or from the oven or the stovetop? Always the stovetop. I mean, again, sometimes the food, like literally like a piece of it gets fried and the rest is cold in the microwave. Plastic Tupperware. I think everybody kind of gets it. Like the more you can avoid plastic, the better. The BPA and different chemicals that plastic's made up of, the body can't break down. The big one is it affects heart, so it lines the arteries. It gets stuck in there. Arrhythmias, heart, cardiovascular type issues, cancers, immune issues, hormonal issues. So you want to switch out those. That should be a straightforward one. So like even plastic bags. Like guys, don't use plastic bags. So here's the solutions, what you're asking. So stainless steel, ceramic, cast iron, toaster oven use, glass, oven, stove, eat more raw. You don't need to always cook everything. And then this is my stuff. Stainless steel, cast iron, that's a ceramic one. I got that from Mercola.com. I never use that.
So ceramic's okay?
Ceramic's okay. There's my microwave. It's a storage facility now. I don't use it. So if you're like, I don't want to throw my microwave out, do something with it so you don't use it. Like literally, I store pots and pans in there. It's brand new. Sticker's still on it. What?
You have to unplug it. The microwave. If you don't use it, you still have to unplug it because of radiation.
Really? I've never unplugged it. That's good. I never even thought about that.
It's still pulling out the radiation.
Good to know. Pyrex, so glass Tupperware. That's an easy, so if you're storing stuff, that's an easy one. Any glass Tupperware. Last thing, so tap water. This is interesting because, again, going back to the cell, a lot of hormonal issues, specifically thyroid issues. Iodine, that when they test you guys, they talk about T3, T4. What the 3 is and what the 4 is iodine. So it's 3 I's if it's T3 attached. If it's T4, there's that. So how that works is iodine chemically, if you guys remember the periodic table, is in the same category as fluoride, chlorine, bromide, all those ones that are end in the ides, right? Well, meaning they all look the same chemically. This is what's supposed to be floating around and then attaching into the cell to do its job, right? So it gets produced and it needs to attach in just like we were talking about with the cell. Well, the problem is when we have fluorine and chlorine in our regular water to clean it up and we don't take that stuff out, instead of it being I, it might be IFC, and it still looks similar, and it's still going to be able to dock in there or block the cell from your normal thyroid hormones to park in the parking lot. Do you see how there can be thyroid issues that come from this? And a lot of chlorine pools, you got to be careful how much time you spend in there. So you want to move more to the salt-based pools if you can. But it's just stuff to be aware of because countries are literally getting rid of fluoride. Where do you get the most fluoride from? Yeah, when you guys use your toothbrush every day, 2 to 3 times a day, and your dentist is telling you, yup, it's good for you. Hey, you want the fluoride treatment before you leave? Run from that stuff. Neurological consequences, banned in a lot of countries, and big-time hormonal blocking issues. Not to mention pharmaceutical, whoa. Pharmaceutical drugs are found in the tap water. So they're getting to the point where the current filtration systems that they use, we can't even get out some. So you could be drinking water and taking somebody's antidepressant at the same time. So that's scary stuff. I'm going to buzz through these. I know that's a lot of slides, but there's a couple interesting ones here. But if you got to go, feel free. Shower. Does anybody have a shower filter or have heard of that? So that's an easy one, guys, because when you're in a hot shower, think of the steam and the off-gassing that's coming from just tap water that's rolling through there. So some of you guys all right, good, I filter my water. So that's check the water I drink. The water that touches your body or you breathe in that's around you, you can get just a shower head filter. So it just attaches on there just like your ones at your sink. That way when you're showering, you don't get this. A 15-minute shower is equivalent to drinking 8 glasses of polluted water. We don't think of this stuff, right? So it's like, Dr. Tom, I can't figure out why I do all this stuff right and I eat perfectly and I exercise and I'm skinny and it's like, you see all the little things that come into play in everybody's health that were never done. There's no finish line to any of this. Do you guys get that? It's constant and always looking to improve and get better. So this might not be your next step, but maybe somebody in this room, it's like, yep, I could do that. That's an easy one. Buy a shower head water filter, put it on. Solutions, basic water filtration, whole house. So I ended up doing the whole house water filter. I like that just because, again, if I wash my hands, I want that to be filtered. Drink water, I want that to be filtered. Go to the bathroom, the toilet water's filtered, I guess. Glass water bottle, stainless steel shower head filter. Here's the filtration. So that vitasolace.net is the one I have. That's what it looks like in my garage. So they're pretty big. They're 4 foot tall. And I got the one that also takes out the fluoride. So one's generalized filtration, all the different chemicals. The other one eliminates all the fluoride. And that company is pretty cool because it'll look up the water issues in, say, your area. Yeah, and they'll tell you oh, maybe you need to add on whatever, some more filtration for.
What was that called?
VITASALUS.net. It might be on your sheets. It's on your sheets. Yeah, it should be on your sheets. Glass water bottle. Do you guys know how much water you should drink each day? Nope. Half your body weight in ounces. So 64 if you weigh 128 pounds. See, this is where like we were probably all taught like, hey, 8 cups of water or whatever. Well, if you're 350 pounds, you're barely getting water in your body, right? That's where the half the weight comes from, because it's how you can kind of get it back to you. Now, why is that important? How do you think you detox? If you don't have enough water, you're constipated, right? Anybody have a night of drinking, wake up the next day, and it's like things aren't moving. Dehydrated, right? That's a problem. These are how flying on airplanes, dehydrated. You guys are probably past the nights of drinking and waking up dehydrated. Kitchen detox recap. So tonight, look through some of your foods, and instead of saying, well, I just won't buy it again, put it in a garbage bag and bring it to donate it. Or if you feel like, sometimes I even feel bad, like, well, I don't want them to have it, throw it out, right? But sometimes people just don't have food in general and just need something. But throw it out, ideally. Unplug your microwave. Pots and pans, start the process of switching those. So that might be an expense where you're like, all right, come Christmas, let's just focus on getting rid of let's start replacing, birthdays, all that good stuff. Look at your water, and then foods, that's an easy one. Plastic cups and containers, get rid of those. That's another easy one. So those are all things that you're going to minimize the dumping in the water. Put this in here for weight gain. So this is something we get asked a lot, like, how do I lose weight right around here? Interesting thing came out about belly fat and how toxins are stored in it. This line here was interesting. So they talked about, it's hard for me to read that close. They used to think that it was hormone-induced and age-related issues, but now they know that the fat produced is to protect us from toxins that accumulate as we age. So it goes back to that bucket thing, but I use a different analogy. I use this. The more of these that you have, prisoners, just think of this as any toxin in your body, a bad guy. To store that thing safely, it needs these, right? If we don't have fat cells to store them in, they are extremely dangerous. So what does the body do? It builds up fat. That's why pigs get fat. I mean, they just don't have good detox, right? So that's why they get fat as well. But so it's safer for our body to hold on to this, because if it lets that loose and it doesn't eliminate, like get rid of it out of the body, then it's more harmful and you feel worse. Here's the example, and you guys have probably experienced this. I've experienced this before without cleansing or detoxing. The classic, so what this shows you is these dots all represent toxicity. In this person that size, it's only about 50% of their body. So they tolerate that well. But now they lose a bunch of fat, right? They lose weight, they get skinny, they did something that loses weight. What did that just do to the toxicity? It concentrated it to now where it's their whole body, because it can't be dispersed over that amount of weight. And they feel like crap. They feel worse. Has anybody experienced something like you lost some weight, you thought you were doing well, but you felt worse? And then your body rebounds, you gain the weight right back because you feel better, because it distributes it. Now, the solution is take you from here. As you're losing weight, you get rid of the prisoners, you get rid of the toxins, so that now when you're here, you stay here. Does that make sense? I like that visual because it's really interesting, and that's what's cool. The detox process that's exactly the point of it. It's to stop dumping in, but then the stuff that's in there, as you lose weight, you will eliminate those as you go to keep the weight off. What this supports is all these. Now, and I threw this in here, but I'm not going to get into this as far as time, but obviously being a chiropractor, what controls all those organs? The brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, right? If I have the most amazing pool filtration system hooked up to my pool and I have no electricity, what does it do? Not a dang thing. Guys, at the end of the day, too, don't forget why you get adjusted, why you take care of your spine. The best doctor you have, you were born with. It still needs to communicate with those. So even if you eat perfectly, detox your body, these are down the road strategies to taking care of your nervous system, because that's what has to communicate and coordinate all the function of those. Does that make sense? We miss this, and people will go, oh, I eat right, I detox, I do all this stuff, and their spine's a wreck, and they can't their body doesn't function well because it's not coordinating well. So never forget that. Obviously, throw in the little chiropractic. So target and eliminate, that's what this stuff is. I'll buzz through this, but just know that there's 2 bottles in here. One loosens up the cell. So if you think of it visually, is if this is the cell and these are toxins, the first product's going to go in, support everything in the liver, the kidneys, and the general organs, and then create these little portals to allow this to come out. But when it's out here, it's more dangerous, right? Meaning the body likes it being in here because it's safe. When it comes out here, if we don't do anything with it, the body will create this retox, and it can be, again, it can be problematic because it goes from the cell to the liver to bile to GI and gets reabsorbed back into the liver and then deposited into possibly some other cell that's more harmful, right? Like your brains or your heart or something. So you don't want the retox. That's where the secondary product comes in, which is this body detox. This is like activated charcoal mostly, and some other things that just helps bind to this. And so think of it as it's going to bind this little thing that's now floating, and it's going to take it to the toilet so that you don't have to deal with it anymore. And it's going to do it in a variety of ways for you uniquely. You might notice like, okay, my sweat might smell a little bit different. Generally, it doesn't. You might notice you just go to the bathroom and the consistency is different. You might notice you're going to the bathroom a little bit more during the process of elimination, right? The body just got to get stuff out. So you take that second part at night, and that's what helps get rid of it. So the first part you take in the morning, and then the second part you take at night. Now, can't take that with medication or within 2 hours of medication, meaning don't take that and blood pressure pills right before bed, because what do you think that's going to do to the chemicals in the blood pressure pills? Flush it. So if you have to take blood pressure pills, which we should work on getting you off of that, then take your blood pressure pills at dinner, 2 hours or more later, take this so that way you're not worried about the medication. And that's how you prevent the retox. It just goes right from the cell out the body. We have a pre-order special. I think it's normally $55. You guys that showed up tonight can get it for $45. It won't come until next week, so if you do want that, Brittany can get you. We don't have any here. We have one here, and we're going to raffle this. We raffle next time. So yeah, if you do want that, just let Brittany know. She can write that down for you so you guys can get that. I typically take it in 3-month increments. So it's one of those you could take ongoing. Probably have 15-20% of patients that take it ongoing like a supplement or like a multivitamin. But I like to cycle things on and off for healing cycles, which are 90 days to 120 days.
How long does one box last?
30 days. So yep, it's a one month deal. Recap: minimize exposure, support and optimize elimination. So we covered the food side of it and kitchen side of it. Next, this is what I want to talk to you guys about. I think we're moving the date. Does everybody think that part 2 is next week, or was that nobody knew? Good. So yeah, one. So we were going to do it next week. We're going to give it a little bit more time. I think May 11th. So if you guys do want to sign up for part 2, I'm going to change, or the date's going to be May 11th, which is another Tuesday night, 6:30 will be that. That's when we're going to get into personal care products. I'm going to recap a little bit of tonight because there'll probably be a couple new people, and then we will go from there. Any questions on anything?